Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Fully Managed podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you, Chris, so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Shannon.
I am so excited to have you on today because we are doing a new game today. You are my little test monkey, and we will have a great time.
I make a good test monkey.
Yeah, exactly. You seem like a good test monkey. Okay, this game is called Pitch It or Ditch It. Okay, so I'm going to tell you, this is the best part about this is these are all like startup mentality kind of thing.
Sure.
But they're all related to startups, which is why it's a great thing. Okay, so first one, throwing you right into it. Sad Tech, that's what it's called. A productivity app that only works if you're mildly heartbroken. Pitch it or ditch it.
Pitch it.
Yeah. I think that was a great one. I'm sure there's a lot of co-founders that start companies because they just came from a divorce or.
Oh, I've seen worse. So yeah, that have made it.
I've gotten whole backgrounds of people that have done exactly that. That is the purpose of their professional switch.
Absolutely.
So.
Absolutely.
Okay, this is another similar vice somehow. This one's funnier though, I think. Co-founder Island, a dating app style tool where you pitch an idea, swipe on potential teammates. And if you match, you have 7 days to build something or lose your domain name forever.
I'm going to say ditch it, but there's a reason why.
Okay.
It's been done, believe it or not. It's actually been done. Yes.
That's crazy.
Yes.
It shouldn't be.
It was like a Tinder co-founders, and then they had a house thing. It came and went. Yep. It's been done.
No
traction
to the person that made that, but that's insane to even have a thought in your mind.
Right, exactly. But it could have led somewhere. Who knows?
Okay. Startup Survivor, a remote accelerator where teams compete in startup themed challenges, and losers get voted off the Slack channel.
I would say pitch it so long as they don't eat anything and go ahead and go downhill day after day. That I would actually be in for, all in.
It would be a really interesting social experiment. I would love to just videotape everyone reacting and how they.
Find out real quickly if you're a real founder or not. Yep.
Yes, and everyone has to go outside and build a fire, and if you can't build a fire, you can't be on at all.
Exactly.
There are too many founders that don't know how to survive in the world generally.
Or anywhere, yeah.
Okay. Unhinged Angel, a reverse Shark Tank, where rich weirdos pitch their ideas to founders, and the founders decide whether they want to back the investor.
I would say ditch it because investors have no valid, fun ideas at all. Zero, none. They are idealists.
I completely agree. That's what makes me the most angry about watching Shark Tank. My favorite ads are when people will post their negative Shark Tank interview and then show how successful their business is after 100%. The Shark Tank. It's the best. Okay. Brand Rehab. I really liked this one. A SaaS tool that scans your startup's name, copy, and pitch deck and then roasts it mercilessly until it will give you a 24-hour brand makeover.
I'm going to say pitch it, and it's being done in many different subsets of ways.
Yeah, I think like people are probably using AI tools to enhance their brand a lot. I hope so.
And they tie it to all the other AI tools to go ahead and create the different variations of it pretty much quickly too. So, and it's come a long way.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic, especially for someone that needs someone to bounce ideas off of, but doesn't have that person or can't hire that person or doesn't have the resources to have that kind of person. It's a great thing to have.
Absolutely.
Okay, finally, The Failery, a museum-like pop-up experience that shows failed startup products and is secretly A/B testing which ones are worth reviving.
Okay, in a way, I think that's brilliant, okay? In another way, who the hell's going to go to it?
I would 100% spend at least $50 to go to that.
We are the only two people in Philadelphia that would go to it. But yeah, I would say pitch it just because I selfishly want to go do that. So,
I would love to do that. I would
Absolutely.
love to test out products. If someone paid me to, I would pay to test out products, honestly. Anything.
Absolutely. And there's slight little nuances you can make changes, and then suddenly they're off to the races in a viable product. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think that's an incredible, someone should capitalize upon that. Anyone watching, someone invent that, please, so that I can go and visit this thing.
That would be awesome.
Well, thank you for participating. I think that was great, and I'm happy that you enjoyed my very silly
Thanks.
idea.
I actually like doing that. That was great.
Well, so we kind of talked about this before the podcast, but I think that this would be really great for you to share more with the audience. I'm sure maybe it's been done before, but so you began your entrepreneurial journey very early on. Some people will tell me high school, some people will tell me college, but you're telling me 6 years old. Can
6 years old.
you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. I mean, it's a really simple story. I mean, how complex can it be when you're 6 years old? I saw a classified ad in the back of a Spider-Man comic book, probably one of the first Spider-Man comic books. And there was a little ad for a business opportunity for something called Burpee Seeds. They're still around. They're like a seed manufacturer. They're in all the nursery stores and all the, the home landscaping stores. And basically, I sent my $5 in for a pack of 50 Burpee seed packets. And these were like sunflower seeds, watermelon seeds, flower seeds. And I received that pack of 50, and I went around door to door on an Air Force base and sold them for $1 a pack. And so I grossed 50, netted $45, and that was the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey at the age of 6.
I think that's beautiful. When did you have this daunting discovery that investors are the worst part of having a business?
I don't know if it's investors or people, but yes, I'll give you an idea of like my experience with investors. I had one investor that came into my company, and he was referral. He was a phenomenal investor. He was referred and everything else. And then on day 2, I got a phone call, and it was just asking, how you doing, what's going on, and I let him know. Okay. Day 3, I got a phone call, same type of thing. Day 4, I got 2 phone calls. Day 4, and it started progressing. And I kid you not, to the point where this guy was calling me 50 to 100 times a day. And so I wrote out a check, sent him back his money, and said, "Have a nice day." That's one of those things where it was like absolute insanity. It was like having a psycho date that attaches to you and like wants to marry you and everything. And it's like, hey, we just had coffee. All right. That's all we had. But in this case, it was an investor. And there's worse cases than that. Worse cases.
That is insane. So what was he calling you about? Was he telling you his opinions on what you were
It's kind of like
doing?
asking it's kind of like asking a crazy person, Shannon, what were you thinking? They have no clue. I think what it was is he acted as an investor when he really wasn't an investor. He was an extremely wealthy person. Don't get me wrong. I mean, he was a big player, but he was just an absolute micromanager. And so because of that, that doesn't work. And it doesn't work for me anyway. As a founder, doesn't work for me.
I don't think it works for most people. I would say that maybe the right person, someone who needs to be micromanaged, there are people like that. But those people usually aren't creating businesses. They need to be pushed. And
absolutely.
It makes no sense to start a business if you don't have the entrepreneurial mindset, so to speak. If you need an investor.
Typically learn that quickly. Yeah. Sorry for cutting you off.
Oh, no, you're okay. What are you saying?
I said, and they usually find that out quickly because start hitting a wall,
Exactly. Yeah, that doesn't make sense. If you don't have the entrepreneurial mindset, then you're not pushing yourself to be able to get to a certain point. And if an investor has to push you to get to a certain point, then
you're dead.
You're not gonna have a successful business.
Yep.
So this is my favorite thing to ask people, especially if they're involved in startups. What is, if you can say, the craziest idea that you've heard of?
What's the craziest idea? I mean, I don't necessarily think it's like the ideas that you went ahead and just came up with here.
You got any fun ones?
That's 10 times crazier than the stuff I've dealt with. But usually we don't deal with crazy ideas. What we end up dealing with, and that you run into more than crazy ideas, are bad ideas. Okay. And so then you say to yourself, okay, is a bad idea a bad thing? Because we fundamentally don't think a bad idea is a bad thing. It's actually requisite. It's a stepping stone in order to get to the good ideas and the great ideas to have those crappy ass, really bad ideas in the beginning. So coming up with a bad idea is actually a green flag as an entrepreneur, to say to yourself that this person may be actually onto something because they started putting the ideas out there, and that's starting the process. So not to sidestep your question, but really I can't think of like something that stood out as a horrendous idea. I think of the founders that had bad ideas. I remember them 100%, but most of them actually got through and created something that was viable.
So is this where your 45 protocols, one daunting 45, scary to me, but I want to know more about that one because 45 is an interesting number to land on for protocols. But is that where that comes in of like the start of the process?
Well, I'm sorry, and I apologize. I apologize ahead of time. I don't know if you're talking about protocols because we've got 300 different micro steps that we call protocols, or I've got the deal rules, of which there may be 40 or 45 or something like that.
I think that's the one I was referring to. Maybe I used the wrong terminology.
Oh, it's I just want to make sure because they are distinctive things. So, I mean, with the deal rules, it's really just historical as to everything that I've run into in business. And so I was thinking to myself one day, you know, what would I do? What would I tell my sons, my kids, if they were starting out in business? What could I give them if, God forbid, I was no longer, you know, around or dead or something along the lines? And so I literally sat down and I wrote out what I call these deal rules that I use just from experience. It doesn't mean that they're hard and, you know, and concrete and everything and not flexible, but over time, they really have proven out company after company after company that these deal rules actually end up being kind of like rules of the universe for creating a company.
What do you think are the most important of these 45? If you could really, like, if you had to do only a select few of these, what would you think are the most important to you?
There's three of them. Number one, trust the process, because anything that you do is really a huge process. The next thing is, and it's even more important, is that I am enough. That's deal rule 29. I am enough. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter your background. It doesn't matter your financial situation, your education situation. It doesn't matter your gender, your religion, or anything else like that. You are enough to go after whatever the hell it is that you want to go after and achieve and create. You wouldn't be on the face of the earth right now, and the universe wouldn't have handed you this life if that wasn't the case. You have everything that you need. You are enough. And the last one is usually the hardest to follow. And founders are brainwashed to think otherwise, okay? And I always phrase it this way: good deal first, money second. Good deal first, money second. Good deal first, money second. What do I mean by that? You don't go out there and raise money for an idea. It doesn't work that way. People think it does, but they don't. Typically what happens is you need to create value, whatever that value is, with whatever you have now, where you are now. Otherwise, you're never going to get that money. And so that means you have to do it, you know, any way possible, bring something to life in some way using what you have right now.
Yeah, no, I think those are all really important. Something that I wanted to touch on for the second one is something that I run into a lot when talking to guests that are part of agencies, many of them being startups, are the I am enough thing. Because I something that I hear so often is people accepting bad clients, like clients that they know have that rub with them, but they're not willing to say no because, you know, they need the money in the beginning. But I'm of the vice. I'm not a startup leader, so, you know, I understand the idea of having to take in maybe not the best match in the beginning because you do need money. You need some kind of income. But that person, there's a line of this person is the worst and wasting your time and your energy, whereas like you don't need a paycheck from that person.
Well, I think it comes down to really what you're talking about in detail is really setting a high standard for yourself. And so when you set a high standard for yourself, then typically that standard that you expect from customers, from clientele, from the interactions is typically a higher standard. And usually does that have a transition time from going from the ugly to the smalls, to the mediums, to the bigs? Yeah. And that's the process. That's the road you're on. But the second that you set that standard, it's kind of like, and listen, I'm a child of the 80s, so I use some bad examples that may not be appropriate, but it's kind of like being in a bad relationship in the beginning. You learn off of being in those bad relationships what standards you should have. And then you work on yourself a bit, you get better, and then suddenly you start attracting the right types of people that you should be attracting. And you don't compromise on that. That's the other thing. Once you get those, you do not compromise, because one bad starts sucking you down into the road of oblivion. So
I completely agree. Also, I think you would love my co-founder because he loves to make dating advice and marketing advice like the same thing.
it
It's
is.
very funny. I think that just reminded me of him so much. But I I would also comment that not only should people know that they are enough, but know what is enough. Because I think that a big problem that people have is wanting to scale at a certain pace or becoming something that they don't necessarily want. There are so many leaders that I see compare themselves to others that they should be at a certain point or whatever it may be, and they can't handle that. Like, even if
Right.
they got to that point, that's something that they can't handle. And I think that's a big trouble that
Sure.
they run into a lot too, is like comparing them to others and thinking that that's what they need to become or whatever it may be, but that's not necessarily what's best for them.
Well, I was having a discussion literally this morning, about an hour or two ago, 2 hours ago, with a founder. And this founder is brilliant. He's a brilliant investor. But even today, he was down on himself. He's like, I'm only 85% done. I haven't accomplished a thing. I should be better than this. And I'm sitting there going, okay, you're not at 0%. You're
Yeah,
not at
85% seems like you got something done.
right. You're at 85%. And he's like, but I should be, and I should, and I should. And I'm like, listen, you're stealing momentum right now and putting yourself in a very bad place mentally, which maybe it's just a pressure release. Fine, do it right now. But the fact of the matter is that's not who you are. And it comes back to, again, being enough, just like, we were talking about.
Yeah, exactly. I think you need to know your worth in the way of like who you're willing to accept into your life and into your business, but you also need to know your worth in the idea that you don't have to be going at the same pace as someone else or like the people you see on LinkedIn.
Sure.
And
And
a
it's
bunch of
grass
different
is
levels.
greener syndrome, and it's all, nobody knows anything about anybody else. I mean, it's just all fluff and perception.
Yeah, LinkedIn is a great networking device, but I also hate it in the idea that, people were already comparing themselves to other people in the professional world through other social media platforms, but to create a social media platform for basically that purpose
Yeah.
is, I think, at a detriment to a lot of people. But, it also shows like the capabilities and inspiration for people that
Sure.
can do things too. So I think there's, it's like a
We could go
double.
on about that forever.
Yeah, no, LinkedIn is an interesting conglomerate.
Interesting is definitely a word for it. Yep.
But then I also want to talk about the good deal first, money second thing as well, because I think that is something. I love that you solidify these as the three things, because I see every time I talk to a startup leader, I see all of these things affect them on like a regular basis. Like, it
Sure.
comes up very obviously. And I think that a lot of people will sacrifice, and maybe this isn't exactly on par with the point of this, but a lot of people will sacrifice a good partnership or the possibility of a really good relationship with someone that would be extremely helpful because they're not meeting short-term goals.
That's
And I
it. Well, that
hate
can go
that.
further too, though. But you can
Yeah,
also make an argument that the products they develop and the companies they develop, because they don't take a longer term, don't mature in the way that they should, because they're chasing the short term gains. And
mm-hmm.
so, it's not just relationships; it's also the company, the products, the structure, what they're creating, everything. 100% with you right there. And it does. I tend to think that when you're operating from a short-term perspective, usually the product and companies and relationships are crap. I mean,
Yeah,
they just are.
exactly. It's you need to spend time on something in order to perfect it or at least make it close to perfection. And you need
Yep.
to work on things, especially like I think relationships are such a big part of like partnerships and relationships and any kind of communication that you have outside of the company with people that would be beneficial to the company are really important. And maybe you won't see a sale or an affiliate relationship or something
Right.
from them immediately, but one, that shouldn't be your sole motivation, I suppose. I think I'm not a money hungry person, so I
Right.
don't really think about that as the first thing in my mind, but it's the idea that people like to feel cared for, and
Sure.
and I think a lot of people, especially in the business world, know and see through the fact that you're communicating them for that sole purpose.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree that going deep on the relationship front is not just something that should kind of be done. It's really part of a fundamental philosophy of really, I don't know if it's caring, I don't know if it's prioritizing, but one of the things I emphasize with founders in the beginning stages is that the number one thing that they should do is spend a tremendous amount of time, almost all their time in the beginning stages, with those first few customers. Just because it's not actually seeing just the product. It's not actually, are they using it for this purpose and crossing off the T's and the dot and the I's. What it enables them to do is get a deeper sense of really who that customer really is as a person. It's enabled to do it that it's more than demographics, it's more than psychographics, it's that je ne sais quoi, that whatever the hell else it is, that actually breathes life and gives the product direction. It gives the company direction. In the beginning, a founder has an idea of where they want to take it, but if they're not listening and talking and interacting with human beings, meaning not just a SaaS platform, not just a fintech platform, they're actually talking with people and seeing them and spending time with them, that product chances are is not going to hit.
Yeah, I would also argue that those relationships in the beginning are so crucial, not only for learning, like what you just said, but also for the idea that I've heard from so many people that they just had such a good relationship with these starting people that believed in them that all of their referrals come from those people.
Right.
That they
Yep.
never had to do outreach
Yep.
because these relationships, one, it's a privilege to be able to spend that much time on those kind of relationships when you're in the beginning, because a lot of people, once they grow, they don't have the ability, like the CEO doesn't have the time to be able to talk to someone every day, or like whatever amount of time that you're communicating with them. And that it is a privilege in the beginning because you get to form those relationships, and those are really valuable. Like when people have a good experience with you, whether you make mistakes or not, startups will.
Sure. Of course.
But communication is the biggest part of that. Transparency. People love to see that and feel cared for, and that will be what will get you referrals.
Well, let me give you an example. That founder that I was talking about that was having a horrible day and whatever else, I said to him, have you told your investors that you're at 85% and you're hitting a wall? And he goes, no, why would I do that? I go, because if I'm an investor and I see on paper that you've written down 85% and that's where you are, I'm happy to cut you a check, most likely, to get you to 100%, instead of losing my entire investment when you're this close to doing it. So get on the goddamn phone and make it happen, or go face to face and make it happen. I go, you haven't given them the truth, so give them the truth, and it's a hard lesson to learn.
Yeah, I think that's valuable in all relationships, business or not, too. I think that, like, if I don't meet my goals by the end of the month or the end of the week or something, I have a reason why, and I know how to do better next time. And I think that's
Sure.
all people want to see, no matter what. I mean, like, if you're delivering something to someone, that's what they want to see. And I think that as long as they know you're doing work towards that, I think that most people don't have a problem with it. There's obviously the disgruntled of us,
Yeah.
that don't are not happy to see anything that's less than 100, and that's valid in some cases, but it's also, people just want to, like, have honest people just want honesty most of the time. They just want to
Sure.
see that you tried as hard as you possibly could to do something.
But that's the key also. I mean, we've been talking a lot about the relationships and setting the standard and, knowing your value. But the other thing is you've got to deliver that value. meaning that, you've got to, if you're expecting to be paid a lot, well, you've got to deliver a hell of a lot. If you're expecting to go ahead and get the investors in at a high valuation, well, you damn well better be pulling the boat. And if you're expecting your team to do extreme amounts of work or act at a higher intensity, well, they're never going to be as intense as you are typically. But what you can do is set that standard, and then they will rise accordingly to the standard that you set. So your intensity, your level, how you go about it. So if anything, you need to look internally as a founder and ask yourself, are you really going ahead and going at it in the way that would be an example for both the investors, for your teammates, for the customers even,
Yeah, I think that it's really important within that process to set realistic expectations for team members and yourself, and
or even unrealistic ones, Shannon.
Yeah. No, like I think that that's so unbelievably important. Like, you can set high expectations in the way of, they're not going to be met, but also you need to be satisfied then when they meet something that is close enough to that, if that's what you're looking for, of course. But I think that that's something that's really important, because you also, if you love your team and you love what you built, then you don't want them to get burnt out so quickly because you're setting unrealistic expectations. Yep. And I think that's something that's huge in the startup world of that.
The hard balance.
Yeah. A lot of leaders assume that everyone under them or, with them or whatever it may be will work as hard as them. And that's just not true. It's just not going to happen, because they don't have the same vision as you. They don't have the same passion for that thing, because you created it. It's your baby. It's not their baby. They're just a job.
And that's the thing. What we think is with teams that, there are two types of teams. Transactional, that's where you're paying somebody, and it's a transaction primarily for them to be a part of your team. And those may work, all right? But really, there's something called the vested interest market, the VIM, the VIM. Those are the people that have the most to gain from the success of the company. So an example I always use is, we've got a company called Happy Howl, which is probably the fastest growing dog food company in the world right now. All their team members have dogs. And I mean, they don't just have dogs, they're dog zealots. They eat dog, breathe dog, shit dog. They get dogs. Okay. So there's not a cat owner on their team. They're not reptile owners. They're not pet owners. They own dogs. And because they own dogs, even though they might not be as disciplined or as hungry or as whatever it may be as the founder Colin is, there's still a much higher motivation rate, and they're aligned philosophically.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. I think that's one of the best workforces that you can have, is someone that is invested in the mission of the business, because I think a lot of people associate missions with nonprofits, but that's not necessarily true. Well, that's not necessarily the only thing that has a mission. Is the idea that many startups have at least set morality, ethics, code, whatever you want to call it, as what working for that is. And I think that if people just have to be invested in that. Maybe they don't have to be invested in the product. Maybe the product isn't something that helps them personally, but something that they do care about is, their fellow workers, like the person that created the company, because they know they care about their customers or their client base or whatever it may be. I think you have to have a passion for not only the product, maybe that's a little less important to me personally, but the whole community of the company, and even the work environment, so to speak. I think you have to care at least to a similar level as the founder does about the success of the company, but it matters what your stakes are in it necessarily. It doesn't have to be something very specific, but it can be, you have to have a stake. You have to have some stakes in the company, is the point.
Sure. But at the same point in time, I'd say this. I think that those first 5 hires, the first 5-10 people, they got to be zealots, at least on some level, because we've measured it. And so your success rates with a transactional team will typically end up being about 10 to 20%, depending upon if you get something like VC funding, angel funding, whatever it may be. But zealot teams are really fundamentally different. You can accomplish way more with nothing or way less, but your success rates go through the roof. So when you have a team made up of that vested interest market, you'll have success rates greater than 80% on average. And so they don't have to be, like the founder, but there still has to be that core philosophy.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I think that I talked to someone really recently that on the podcast that it genuinely just made me happy to hear this kind of story of him just having this sense of mutual admiration for everyone working at their agency because of how hard they all work. Like, I think that's the kind of people you want on that core team of
Absolutely.
like being inspired by someone's passion, like whether you're doing a similar job as them or not. And I think that is a great environment to have for a startup, because that's something that you're being pushed just by the sheer success of another person.
Right. Well, the one thing that I always use as a litmus test is the person feeling on a Sunday night like they want to go to work, or are they feeling like, and getting that, oh my God, what did I do with my life type of feeling? If it's the second, something's wrong. Mm-hmm. So something's wrong there.
Yeah, maybe they should maybe put out more, what's the word I'm looking for? Anonymous surveys.
If you're even doing an anonymous survey, it's too late.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe there's better environments that can be created to ensure that people aren't getting to that point.
That comes from the top down, though. I mean, I think I think it's really simple. Either the founder is managing it and giving the culture the right DNA, or they fucked up. It's as simple as that,
I think that's a fantastically crass way to end, because we're a little over time. But I honestly, but I just appreciate, I want to say that I do appreciate the realism that you provided for this, because truly, I think a lot of people do sugarcoat things on this podcast because they want to share the good things, of course,
Yeah, I have no tact, Shannon. None.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, because I am very similar in the idea that I don't think it's really important to. I think people should tell it how it is more often, especially in the professional world, because people are looking at you for models most of the time. Like, people are looking at everyone else as a role model, despite the fact that they want to put it that way or not, because they're inspired by other people in their space.
But they're all basing it off of copies of copies of copies of copies, and therefore it keeps getting diluted, and suddenly you're eating oatmeal every day without sugar or anything else in it. So that's...
Or maybe too much sugar, because they're sugarcoating everything.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, that would have been a better analogy.
But yeah, there's a lot of people that are only sharing the good things and not the struggles or like what is true about the space. And I just appreciate the authenticity that you provided for this podcast. Thank you so much.
Sure.
And thank you everyone for watching. I hope you learned a great deal from this podcast. I thought this was great. So I hope that you guys are able to take as much value from this as I did. And thank you again for joining us, and have a lovely day, everyone.